All right, thank you all for coming out. This is another of our mostly monthly reading series events. I came up with that name about 3 years into it when I realized that this was definitely not going to happen every month. And so I started doing it more often and more often, but it was still, 2 or 3 per semester. So I was thinking, most months we'll have an event. And somebody told me I needed a better title than reading series. And so the mostly monthly events were founded. Just a reminder, there are sign-in sheets, so if you didn't sign in, they're on the table there. That's both, one, I'll be sending that to your professors if you're not in my class, and two, that is your chance to win one of our fabulous prizes. So hopefully you're one of the lucky few. The one downside to having a great turnout like this is your chances of winning a prize have dropped. Also, I do recommend taking snacks. I don't want to take all of them home, so please eat. I found that's one of the things that people really look forward to at these events is a granola bar and a fruit snack. And with the side of poetry. This is our first event of this semester. We will be having events again in March and April, and I'll be sending information out on those. We're really excited. We continue to have lots of interest to come read at our campus. And I love to bring people out to our campus because none of them really know we exist. So it's kind of a cool moment when they walk on the campus and realize how nice it is out here. So today we are featuring Emily Jungmin Yoon, who is an assistant professor at UH Manoa, and also a very, very talented poet. So I'm really happy to have her. This was actually a suggestion from Ms. Jade, who said I should reach out and bring her out because she really likes her work. And I was like, okay. And thankfully we were able to make it work, and here we are. So without any further ado, Emily.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for showing up for poetry on Thursday. So like Andy said, I'm an assistant professor of Korean literature at UH Manoa. And before moving here to Hawaii, I used to live in Chicago, which is where I did my PhD. And moving here, I had a lot of questions whether my poetry will be held in the same way, because I left behind my literary communities and all my friends. And the way that kind of institutions work are different here. So I'm really grateful to be invited to this space and to meet all of you. And so thank you, Jade, thank you, Andy, for having me. And again, thank you all for showing up. So I have 2 poetry collections published. The first one is called A Cruelty Special to Our Species, which was published in 2018. So I'm going to read a few poems from that one and then transition to my recent second poetry collection, Find Me as the Creature I Am, which came out just last October. But just as a trigger warning, so A Cruelty Special to Our Species does center the history of the former Korean comfort women. Do you all know that term or familiar with that history? A lot of you probably are. But a comfort woman is a euphemistic term for the sex slaves of the Japanese Empire, most of whom were Korean, which was one of the most important, Korea was one of the most important colonies of the Japanese Empire at the time. So in the late 1930s and early 40s, a lot of women were forced into sexual slavery for the soldiers of the Japanese Imperial Army. So they were scattered across multiple bases in China and sometimes the Philippines, various places of Asia. So some of the poems will be talking about their stories and their histories, and if you need to, step out or do whatever you need to, I totally understand. So I'm going to start with the sadness and the anger and move towards more tenderness, which I try to focus on for my second poetry collection. I'm going to start with some sections from a long poem sequence called Testimonies, which are based on the actual testimonies of former comfort women. Since then, the first public testimony was in 1991. And since then, most of these women have passed away. And all the stories that I'm reading about, the authors have also passed away. I believe there are fewer than 20 registered former comfort women in South Korea today. Testimonies by Hwang Geum-ju. A draft notice for girls. Who was going to go? Everybody crying. I went. I dressed nicely and went. Train. Windows covered with tar paper. None of the girls knew. Japanese soldiers on horses. Vast Manchurian field. It was now much too cold to sleep. Thanks to our body warmth, the sun rose. I waited for them to send me to a factory. They could not possibly dump me here. I was called Nagaki Haruko. My long hair was still braided. An officer told me that there were 5 orders to obey. If I missed any, I would be less than dead. I hoped one of the orders was for me to work at a factory. I looked at his jacket, hung inside out, to hide his name. I looked at my virgin's braid, at his knife. He told me I was not going to any factory, told me to take off my clothes. I told him I did not understand his order and his kind of factory. And he laughed. Girls arrived, got sick, pregnant, injected with so many drugs. Nameless animals exploded on top of us. The day of liberation, suddenly, no sound of horses. The last soldier stood in the kitchen. Your country is liberated, and my country is sitting on a fire. So I left the barracks. I walked. I was alone and walked all the way to the 38th parallel. American soldiers sprayed me with so much DDT. All the lice fell off me. It was December 2nd. I lost my uterus. I am now 73 years old. I should have mentioned, so how these poems were formed is that I looked at the actual transcriptions of the testimonies. And it's interesting because these poems came from multiple layers of different women's kind of work to preserving their memory. So there was a historian who actually recorded these testimonies. And then there was, the layer of translation into English. And now I read them in an English language monograph, and then I turned them, kind of did a genre translation of turning them into poetry. So what I did is, do you have a question?
Yeah, did you have to interview people to get your material?
I didn't, so I do speak Korean, and I did want to interview them myself. And at the time when I was writing this manuscript, I was very young. I was like 22 at the time. I was doing my MFA at NYU, and I came across, let me start from how I came to even write this book and how this history became so central. I was thinking about how to write about Korea in a way that can be held in the United States. Every time I would talk about the Korean War or even the Second World War, I would just be met with blank stares. And I was a little shocked by that because having grown up in Korea, this history was just so part of the common kind of collective knowledge. I grew up, just kind of knowing about it. And, thinking about the US involvement in Asia and just like around the world, military involvement, it was hard for me to fathom that people had no idea about the US involvement in the separation of the Korean Peninsula and just anything else outside of the United States. So I wanted to write about all of these questions, and I thought I need to deepen my historical knowledge before I can write about them, right? Because poetry is also an art of omission, right? I can't narrate everything as a historian would traditionally. So I took out a bunch of books from the library, and I found myself gravitating to these women's stories and their testimonies. And then the poems just kind of came out. Yeah.
Do you have any haiku forms?
I don't really write in form, usually mostly in free verse. But this poem, actually I'll pass around this book. So from page 15 is where the Testimonies poems show up. So I do play with form a lot in this collection, especially with this poem sequence, because so what I did is I read the testimonies, extracted some of the words, and rearranged them onto the page. Right? So it's not in the same order, it's not the same word count as the actual transcriptions of the testimonies, because I had to turn them into poetry. So you'll kind of see how that looks visually on the page when you get the book. I'll read a couple more poems from this sequence. Kim-sang-이. I was 14 years old. It was around November 26th. It snowed. I remember. I was on my way home from the photo studio with my portrait when a man in olive drab clothing grabbed me by the collar, cursed in Japanese. Was he Japanese or Korean? I could not tell. I was thrown onto a truck of mournful sounds of weeping. These girls and I crossed the border into China. There was no poison, no ropes. In Suzhou, I was number 4. I was Takeda Sanai. The first night an officer grabbed me, I drank disinfectant, but I didn't die. In Nanjing, I had malaria, appendicitis, hemorrhage in my vagina, but I didn't die. In Singapore, I saw dark-skinned men digging ditches. They looked at us as if they would burst into tears. In Singapore, the war ended. We boiled leaves from trees and wild greens. We ate this to survive. When I made it back to Busan Harbor, I went to my brother's house in Daegu. In his dream, I had shaved my head, was drowning in the ocean, but I didn't die. My name is Kim-sang-이. I was born on December 20th, 1920. I was born into a good family. I am a Catholic. I should forget and forgive, but I cannot. When my head turns toward Japan, I curse her. I want to find solace, but I cannot. When I wake up every morning, I cannot. So this one is an example in which the poetic license or the translator's license on my part is a little bit more distinct because there's a lot of repetition. You know, I didn't die, and I cannot, which isn't in the original. Well, it is in the original transcript, but not repeated. But I chose to repeat them for emphasis in the poetry. And in the actual transcription, in the actual testimony, it starts with, my name is Kim, so she introduces herself, but I chose to put it at the end. Yeah, question?
Yeah, so your style, is it prose? Is that the term that you call your style of writing?
Prose?
Yeah, prose you write? No? What style do you write in?
I guess mostly it's like free verse poetry, but I get why you're asking that question because there's also prose poetry, and sometimes it's hard to distinguish prose and poetry. I think the binary is really blurry, actually. But what distinguishes prose poetry from, let's say, flash fiction, for me is in poetry, the emphasis is more on imagery, right, and sound rather than plot, which is usually the kind of prerogative for fiction. So in that sense, no, I don't really write a lot of prose. I don't really write a lot of essays either outside of, kind of like scholarly work. But I have a lyric essay in this collection, which started out as prose, but I try to make the case that it could be also counted as poetry. Yeah, so the distinction can be blurry. Thanks for that question. I'll read just one more poem in the sequence and move on. Pak Kyung-soon. There was a man about 45 years of age with a mustache who told me to work for Japan and meet my brother in Hiroshima. The man said my refusal might not be good for my parents. The man and his men took me to Shimonoseki. I was led into a room. I was told to take a bath. I was told to take off my clothes. I only begged that I meet my brother. When they finally took me to Hiroshima, my brother was alone in a big empty room. He asked if I came as a comfort woman, and I promised I would return to see him again. When flower buds were about to appear, I was taken to Osaka. In its room, I was number 10. I was then a comfort woman. I became so sick with syphilis, I could not walk. One night, an officer came and told me to get ready. I was in such great pain. The next thing I remember is arriving in Seoul. It was June 1945. Immediately, I had a miscarriage. The mustached man learned of my return, told me to return to the comfort station. To avoid the draft again, I got married. Our new life, a rented room. I could smell the odor of my weekly number 606. Arsenic for syphilis. My baby discharged pus from his ears, was called crazy. My brother returned home with burns and lumps all over his body from radiation, discharged, disintegrated bone the size of teeth near his wounds. The Japanese soldiers discharge out of charge into every room. I know it's like dark, but it's not gonna go uphill from here, just letting you know. I do have a few poems in this book about my kind of personal experience and my grandmother's experiences as well. So I'll read a few of those and then move on to Find Me as a Creature I Am. So I don't know if you can tell, English is my second language. I moved to Canada when I was 11 years old. So at that time I didn't really speak English. And I picked it up quickly, but I would pronounce things wrong for a long time, just sometimes, because I would learn from reading a lot of the times. And with English, it's not always super intuitive. So I would pronounce things wrong sometimes, and that would make me really insecure. So this poem kind of comes from that memory. Bell theory. When I was laughed at for my clumsy English, I touched my throat, which said ear, when my ear said year, and year after year I pronounced the new thing wrong, and other throats laughed. Elevator, library, vibrating bells in their mouths. How to say azalea, how to say forsythia. Say instead golden bells, say I'm in ESL. In French class, a boy whose last name is Kring called me Belle. Called me by my Korean name, pronouncing it wrong. Called it loudly, called attention to my alien. I touched the globe moving in my throat, a hemisphere sinking. Called me across the field lined with golden bells. I wanted to run and be loved at the same time. By Kring, as in ring of people. Where are you going? We're laughing with you. The bell in our throat that rings with laughter is called uvula, from uva, grape. A theory. Special to our species, this great bell has to do with speech, which separates us from animals. Kring looked at me and said, "Just curious, do you eat dogs?" And I wanted to end my small life. Be reborn a golden retriever of North America. Lie on a field lined with golden bells, loved. Today, in a country where dogs are more cherished than a foreign child, an Oregon Senate candidate says no to refugees. Says years ago, Vietnamese refugees ate dogs, harvested other people's pets. Harvest, as in harvest grapes. Harvest, as in harvest a field of golden rice. As do people from rice countries, as in people eat dog worlds. Years ago, 1923 Japan, the phrase "jugoen ojitsen" is used to set apart Koreans, say 50 yen, 50 cents. The colonized, who used the chaos of the Kanto earthquake to poison waters, set fire. A cruelty special to our species. A cruelty special to our species. How to say jugo, how to say gojit, how jugo sounds like die in Korean, how gojit sounds like lie. Lie, lie, library, azalea, library. I'm going to the library, I lied years ago on a field lined with forsythia. I love reading this poem in the library. Oh, thank you. At UH West.
The phrase lie, and it's how you use that.
Thank you. Yeah, I love repetition. That's one of the old tricks in my bag. Okay, I'm gonna read one more poem from this. It kind of gestures towards my second book, which is more concerned about kind of natural disasters and what we do to the ultimate other, the natural world. Whereas this first collection was more focused on what we do to one another as humans. So this poem is called Time in Wales and features my husband, who is a Korean adoptee and started learning Korean later in his life. So he would kind of practice Korean with me sometimes, or I would hear him practice. And it comes from that and the story he told me about his adoption. Time in Wales. Our legs of yellow skin next to one another, calves spread. I think of beached whales, the arcs of their bellies, clean and gleaming. A whale would lie in the shape of something cold, the body sipping on itself like a drain. Gravity sucks a whole whale onto sand. You study Korean, whispering, 무르르다, 무르르다, meaning literally, water rises, but really meaning to improve or to rise in sap in springtime trees. Come spring, it will be your birthday. We will have seaweed soup, supply our blood with oxygen. Do you know that Koreans do that because hundreds of years past they saw whales eating seaweed after giving birth? You cross your legs, their hair black and coarse like my father's and my grandfather's across the ocean. And do you know that whales have hair? Perhaps a sign of their past when they walked the earth. Summer of years past, your father across the same ocean to bring you to America, where you would grow up speaking a language different from mine. Do you know that whales too detect where one another comes from through song? That music I hear is yours and ours. 무르르다, 무르르다. Water rises. Whales die in this year's hot winter. Your father has told you of the summer, the dank heat. Your foster mother ran after you, you already asleep, in your father's arms, wailing your name. You will not be called by that name the next day, and years will pass by. But when you're 10, you will write about that story and spell whale as the animal whose breath is a distance, spouting steam, the great animal that becomes crushed by air and sprayed with words, man's fault. And yes, so perhaps the world will end in water, taking with it all loving things. And yes, in grace, only song, only buoyancy. You rise now, whispering, 물올리다, 물올리다, meaning, literally, to raise water, but really meaning to bring water to a boil. Another fun fact, so that photo of mine is like from like 6 years ago when I did a wedding photo shoot, because it was like 2019, and my husband and I were gonna do our wedding in 2020. So as they do in Korea, we did like a whole photo shoot, and then 2020 came, we couldn't do our wedding. So we had our wedding finally in 2022, and we were gonna have our friend officiate for us. And 2 days before the wedding, she said she has COVID and can't be at the wedding. So we freaked out, like, should we self-officiate, blah, blah, blah. And then our wedding coordinator said, why don't you just write like letters to each other and have the DJ just announce like key things that are happening, but you can fill that time by writing letters to each other. So I wrote this poem, not a poem, like my vow, I guess, like the day before the wedding, and I turned it into a poem, kind of shortened version of it into a poem, and now it's in the book. And I'm tooting my own horn, but Gracie Abrams shouted out this poem in the Cosmopolitan magazine as one of the best love poems she's read. So, yeah, that's right. Okay. Vow. I love you. I don't know how else to begin. How we began, though, was almost as if it were already written. The details of how we arrived at each other to say, I love you, even as we fall asleep, to let each other's name be the first sound we utter every morning, can only be a gift of careful construction, a design of an elsewhere where we were already together. Saying nothing, you make me want to live more meaningfully. The world is so wild, beautiful, and terrifying, and everywhere we turn, a new atrocity. Then I close my eyes and picture joy. Among things, there is this day. Among faces, there is yours. And I am no longer afraid. I watch you in your own quiet moments, and I want this life. I want this life to be longer. All I want is more time with you. I love you. This is the only way I know how to end. Have you heard of the Greenland shark? So I think one of the oldest living creatures on Earth. It's a large shark that can live hundreds of years, and their biggest predator, of course, is a human. But it just kind of really sounds unreal, right? A shark could have been alive during the Renaissance. and could be still alive. But then I think a lot of them, they die because they get accidentally caught in fishing nets. And that just sounds like such a sacrilege. So I was reading about the Greenland shark, and I don't know, she broke my heart. So this poem is from the perspective of a Greenland shark. The title is The Greenland Shark. It made sense. You have to keep living beyond surprise for desire to return. With antiquity returns beauty, she thought. Or rather, longevity is an attraction. Growing long and old on her own, she had survived centuries of names man had given to time, such as what they called the Renaissance, which was a good season for their certain male specimen. She thought she remembered a name or two she was given by men who saw her and left her alone, because fear, because disgust, mercy, perhaps. Through it all, her heart renewed its languorous beating, so now they want to know, what is your secret? What is your soft body capable of? Her fat liver could oil their killing machines. Her flesh could drive a pack of sled dogs mad. Cannibalism was not beneath her. Wisdom? Please. She asked nothing and asked for none. No, what she wanted was to eat in peace. They want to know how she achieved her age, how they could do the same. This was the final desire her body held. For some of them, anyway, not these men whose livelihood depended on the same fish she hunted, who acted like they had permission to all life, though they do own these decks on which she lay woven into their nets, listening still, listening to their anger, that it wasn't her. It was not even her that they wanted, her heathered mass that carried her through ancient ice and thaw, and nobody asked her name. Just a couple more. The next one is called Body of. Body of. My mother, teaching me how to protect my body. When a man touches you here, yell, I am a body that will bear a child. How was I, a child, to understand that as the sanctity of my body? How was I to know, to say, the body without that potential is also whole and holy? A man who touches a child does not care whether she will one day be fertile. A dear friend, on making the body useful, encourages me to have babies. What does it mean to say I have my body? I have a brain, you know, I have a life, a heart, I've said before, meaning only mine, without knowing there were outlines of other bodies fleshing in my center, meaning the body of woman, for whom body means collective, as it is for the body of evidence, of knowledge. Here I present my body of work, my body of water, here my body. But are we of our bodies? Bodies are thrown across oceans, across lands. Bodies lie bleeding through the evidence of bullets. Honest bodies bleeding honestly. In order to continue living, we try to leave evidence of our lives. We accumulate bodies in whatever way we can. Men leave themselves in women's bodies. Friends, I am just now ready to love my own. I love my father's eyebrows on my face, and I love my mother's calves on my legs, and I love the parts of my body that I do not name. Let that be enough. The future of this land is uncertain in how high the flames, the waters will be. This land in which I still bleed, this land in which I give up something every day. I realize I said we're going to move to tenderness, and then it's like still dark. But then, you know how poets are.
I have a
One more question.
So you talked about body in that last poem, and Christians say take care of your temple, right? Take care of your body is a temple. So I just want to make that correlation there.
Oh yeah, thank you, thank you. I think the older I get every year, the more precious I feel about my body and the need to care for it, right? I think, when you're a teenager, you're immortal, right? And then you realize, oh gosh, mortality. And so, but I wrote that poem really thinking about I was just really irked because I had a friend who kept telling me to have babies. And it just felt like such a kind of breach of privacy also, and just why are some people allowed to tell other people what to do with their bodies? So that kind of came from that question and frustration. Okay. I do want to end with something kind of uplifting. Hard to find. They're all kind of sad, but I still maintain that they're all also about love.
Can you expand on that? Because you're self-aware of, you call it darkness,
Mhm.
but obviously you do find lighter notes and stuff. So, are you drawn to that, or is it for example, initially the first book was about the reflection of the history, right? Which
Yeah.
It's difficult to interpret it any other way, but now as you continue to grow as a writer.
I think, as poets, maybe some of you are also poets and writers. I think hard emotions like anger, sorrow, frustration, that can sometimes be seen as more rigorous, right? Kind of writing about love, about friendship, about the moon and the stars, because that's sometimes what's expected of from people who don't write poetry. Some people just don't want to kind of touch that, right, about happiness. But I realize it's actually very difficult to write about those things in a way that's still refreshing, right? In a way that's not cliche, that says something new, but in a way that also doesn't turn away from the reality of the world and the real emotions that I have. So some of these poems do come from that experiment of, okay, if I find myself going dark, I'm just going to turn around and say, no matter what, this poem is going to end in love. So it's kind of hard because sometimes a poem goes to a dark place and it has a mind of its own and you just have to go there with a poem. But I think it was useful for me to kind of think about my practice in that way. I don't know if that answers your question.
It's like there's a light at the end of the tunnel after all the darkness. There's like, or you could actually mention how strong they became after surviving all of this abuse.
Yeah, I guess that can be useful, right? Because I think oftentimes with poetry, again, it's sometimes like, okay, follow the darkness, say what's difficult. And I think that's good sometimes. But following the light, as you say, for me was more difficult because what inspires me to write and pour out these words are things that make me sad, make me angry. But how do I care for myself amid all of that, despite all that was something that I wanted to explore in this book. So hopefully some of that comes through in the whole book. But I do want to end with something that's a little bit just more clearly about kind of positive emotions and about community. So I'm going to read this sort of kind of longer poem called Gala. And this poem really brings in my friends because I bring lines from their poems. So maybe like five, 6 lines from my friends' poems, and they're incorporated into this poem as a kind of way to be with them, which I wrote during the lockdowns. Oh, it's also set in Vermont, where we were all at a writer's retreat. Gala. One evening, the summer sun isn't enough. We poets from the South and West in the US sense of the words, and the East in the global sense, walked through a blade of Vermont, in sunglasses, in lace-up boots, in zigzag, in jeans, commenting on a beauty so murderous and magical it emancipated some of us hundreds of years ago. For us to hear, you should feel lucky to be in this country. One of us looks out at the rows of yellow flowers and says, "Can you imagine arriving at land like this, thinking, how beautiful, I'm going to take it?" Which reminded me of another friend, this time in Paris, looking around its gilded splendor to say, "Look what empire is capable of." Which reminded me of another friend, this one from Paris, looking down at Seoul from a gold observatory to say, "It's kind of ugly." And it felt as if he had said that I am. One evening of summer in Vermont, we are beauty in sunglasses and embroidery and flower crown and plaid, cocktails, our languages in our hands, delicious and loud. We are at a gala for writers. "What does gala even mean?" one of us asks. To which another one says, "I think it's a kind of party." To which the first one says, "No, motherfucker, I want the etymology." And we flare in laughter. 2 years later, I consult the online etymology dictionary to see gala, noun, 1620s, festive dress or attire, obsolete, from French, en gala, perhaps from Old French, gal, merriment, from galer, rejoice, make merry. See gallant. See gallant in our festive red dresses and snapbacks and public merriment and skins, racing through this country on the hayride, some of us standing through the turbulence of it all, touching the buried shrubbery and August dirt, indulging in a gala. See here, party of us, siblings, what did we sing in our hot breath? One evening, we looked up at the sky and I asked about the man-given names of its elements. Is it Andromeda? Is it Venus? None of us knew shit. We asked anyway. One evening, we saw small wings glittering over the same yellow flowers, and knowing they were butterflies in hundreds to repopulate the land, sat astounded. We had only days ourselves to fly back to the South and the Midwest and the West in the US sense of the words. The summer sun went promptly, fastidious with its red folds over the sky. We lit the candles anyway. We passed the bread. We passed the wine. If the only world is a hell with my siblings, I thought, I should feel lucky to call this world home. Brother, sister, I am here. I walk with you. I'll end there. Thank you. Thank you. I think we have a few minutes for questions, if there are more questions or compliments. I have student with the gold chain first.
So I like how since the word gala connects to Old French, like you use France, maybe Paris, to liken someone's life to maybe an empire, a French empire. Maybe one guy might look at his life, his empire, and say, I conquered a lot. I did super well. This empire is great. The person right next to him looks down at all the golden stuff he made and says, I really screwed up. This is horrible. I killed lots of people. I changed lots for the worse.
Yeah, no, you would hope that there are more people in the latter category, right?
And so it connects all of us to a nation and even more so to a land. The rest of the poem, like a field, and again, like an empire.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, again, we would hope that there are more people in the latter category, if like who would feel remorse, you know, looking at all this land that's been occupied, right, by empire. But then, like, recently I saw this video. I'm a millennial, so I'm not on TikTok, but I do watch reels, you know, on Instagram of things that were like trending on TikTok like weeks ago. But I think this one is very recent. It's like a video that Trump made of his vision for Gaza. And it's like Trump Gaza with like money raining down on the beach and like this gold gilded hotel with Trump written on it. And I was like, this is a freaking nightmare, right? I mean, I believe it's happening, but sometimes things that you know are coming are just like literally visualized in front of you and you just feel it on your skin. And it's just a whole wave of fear. So I was just also thinking about that, the empire building of today, right? You had a question? Oh, yeah, I was looking at you.
I wanted to say I really liked the poems about your husband trying to reconnect with his culture, and also the Greenland Shark one. I found them very fascinating.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love love, and I wanted this book to be really about love, about friendship, about the people that I want to hold close to through my words, just a way to be close to them and to remember this feeling, especially amid kind of disasters and feeling so hopeless about things. But then I realized that my first book was also made out of love, right? Like, I don't think I could have kind of dug myself into this history of former comfort women, and there's like histories of my grandmother too in there, my own personal history. I don't think I could have written about them if I didn't feel a kind of profound affection for them, like the need to kind of preserve their stories beyond what I saw, right? So kind of a way of extending their memory. So I realized maybe every poem is an act of love. Different shades, different kinds of love, but yeah, thank you. Any other cues or cons? Yeah.
I had a question. So I was thinking while you were reading your first poems about the novel Comfort Woman, and I was wondering if that was something you had read before or since, and how that kind of connects to your own kind of understanding.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay, confession. I haven't read that novel, but I feel guilty about it because it has the title Comfort Woman in it. And Nora Okja-Keller is also, she lives here, right, in Hawaii. So I feel like I owe my time to that and have to pay attention to kind of what lineages am I writing in, right? How do I contextualize myself in the lineage of writers who have written about the same things, written in the same styles? But I haven't read that novel. Most of the research for this book came from kind of historical accounts.
Anybody in the back?
Oh, any projects I'm looking forward to in the future? Well, I am contracted to write my third book by 2029, so I guess I have to do that. But I am working on a book of translations. So I'm translating a book of poetic theory by this feminist South Korean poet named Kim Yoon with my husband. So that's been in the works for many years. It's under review at a press, so hopefully that will be out in the world in the next couple of years. I'm also working on my scholarly monograph, so my dissertation was on contemporary Korean and Korean American women's poetry. So hopefully that will also be out in the world in my lifetime. But I guess I'm excited about those.
Follow up on the translation. Do you feel like being a poet and a creative helps you to better understand how to translate things? Because it isn't like we've all read literal translations, like Google Translate, for
Mhm.
example, how bad it is. So that idea of trying to kind of envision what the words actually mean rather than just say what the literal meaning is.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I really respect translators and the work of translation. I do think for me it's a creative process, translation is, but I also recognize it as like a separate art form too. I don't want to make it seem like, it's like a subcategory of writing for me, but I think they help each other, really. I think that because I also had to translate myself a lot, like in social situations as I was growing up, I found that some things just don't have the exact, counterparts, from Korean to English or the other way around. But in the process of trying to kind of describe that, sometimes rises poetry, right? I'm sure a lot of you are like multilingual. Maybe there's a word that's like perfect, in one language, but just doesn't exist in English or something, right? But like just that act of description, I think it's like really rich ground for poetry. And sometimes I'm translating something and you are encountered with really exciting but difficult choices, right? So for example, maybe you're translating a sonnet into Korean, something, which the sonnet form doesn't really exist in Korean poetry, right? So how do you preserve the musicality, right? What are some other strategies you can use to create a kind of rhythm so that the reader reads it with the same kind of aliveness, right? And I feel like the poet's sensibility comes in a lot in those moments of decision. And so it's a creative process and also really fun, but also very challenging. Yeah.
One other thing, since we're giving it away, I
Oh,
thought
yeah.
maybe you should explain what this one was as well.
Oh yeah, that's my chapbook that was published a couple years before my full-length collection. So what a chapbook is, it's like a very short poetry collection. So that chapbook centers all the poems in that, I think, are the comfort women poems, as well as a few poems about my grandmother in the Korean War. And then, so the full-length collection includes all of those poems, and additionally more. I also have very few copies that I brought to sell if anyone wants them. So, yeah. Oh, there are two more questions. Yes.
I'm just curious because you are technically a 1.5 generation, right? Having
Yeah,
been through
yeah.
2 years. How is your work received in Korea? Is it received as a Korean American, as a Korean work? I'm just curious because when you're 1.5, you're in that very strange gray zone, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I also immigrated at a time when people were on the internet all the time. So I feel like it's probably very different from people who immigrated earlier, right, in the 90s or 80s and on. So I felt always kind of connected to Korea through the cyberspace in some ways. It was like much more accessible to like look at Korean popular media stuff. So I'm grateful that I could speak Korean. And so my first book was translated into Korean in 2020, and I had the chance to meet readers in Korea for that, despite all the COVID stuff, like online and like very small gatherings. And before it came out, I was asking the same question: how is this going to be received? Because this history is like, again, like this part of the collective knowledge. So it's not news to them, right? It's not like the same kind of edifying, purpose. But I think in Korea, I thought, okay, well, this is just another way of expanding on the narrative, which already exists. And in Korea, it's a very much politicized issue. If anyone is following that at all, it's like a very contentious issue before South Korea and Japan. I can't get into all of it, but for years, Japan has denied this history or like revised the histories to say, these women wanted to be, comfort women. And then there are all these like different agreements between the Prime Minister of Japan and the President of South Korea, which the women didn't consent to. So it's like highly politicized, right? And kind of controversial. But I think my book was a way of kind of letting the emotional information of that history stay with us. Hopefully, that was my hope. And people liked that, I think, that we could talk about it in a different kind of mode. I think there's one more question.
I actually had a similar question. How many of your book was in your home country?
Yeah. So yeah, the first book was translated into Korean by this well-known novelist named Han Yoo-ju. She's been translated into English as well because the publisher didn't realize that I speak Korean. But for the second book, I'm translating it myself. So that's another project that I'm actually supposed to be working on. And I was like, well, I can do it, right? Like, who else could understand it better? And I like have to do it, and then I immediately regretted it because it's a lot of work. And if you're translators yourselves, you'll recognize that translating something, it's almost like revising, right? It's like rewriting the whole thing. So I'm like, I don't have time for this. But then I already said I'll do it, so I'm doing it.
Quick follow-up.
Yeah.
So you talk about the Korea reception. What about here? You know, in recent years, we're encountering, we went from YouTube movement to banning books. So what's your experience here? How's the reception? Have you faced any of that? And a graphic book, and especially ripping off a bandit or something that a lot of people would like to forget.
Yeah. You mean my first book, or?
Yeah, the first book.
Well, you know, I was kind of worried that some people would attack me, you know, verbally or whatever, because again, this issue can be very sensitive. Luckily, though, most people have been really kind, and on the continent, a lot of people of Japanese descent came up to me and said, "I'm really glad that there is, you know, poetry about this history." So people have been usually pretty kind about it. A lot of people told me that it's like the first time they learned of this history, and I hope that it doesn't end there, that they look up other sources too, and kind of connect it with their own cultures, histories of misogyny and war and militarism as well, because I hope that, you know, when people encounter history, whether it be about Korea or Hawaii or anywhere, that it's all of us, right? It's all of our history. So yeah, people have been nice, but then also it's like poetry. You know, my friend said something really funny, that when people don't understand poetry, they think it's their fault. But when they don't understand fiction, it's like the fiction writer's fault or the prose writer's fault. So I think for poetry, people tend to be more generous, I think. Thank you so much.